Hey, this is Madeline Sklar.
And Suze Cooper, and you're listening to All Things Audio. Hey there, Madeline. How are you?
Hey, Suze. I'm great. How are you doing?
Yeah, not too bad, thank you. Not too bad at all.
I'm really bummed that you no longer get the notification when someone goes live. Like, I always do the set reminder when somebody has a space, like, for instance, this space. I hit set reminder, which means once you're live, it's in my notifications. And it hasn't been that way for weeks now, and I'm really frustrated because this really hinders discoverability. I have to actually go to your profile and tap on the purple ring to get in here. I normally don't have to do that.
Yeah, I know. And it didn't even come up in my notifications that I had a space to start. So that's quite annoying.
Oh, yeah. It used to give you a reminder 30 minutes out.
Yeah, and I think I said last week about how we said then there was something with the link last week, and you said to me, oh, have you changed the link over or something? And I hadn't. But at the same time, you said, oh, I couldn't find the space very easily. And I said, no, I couldn't either. I literally had to go back into where I'd scheduled it to find it, to be able to start it. And I realised that what I was missing was that notification. It's normally there in my notifications. It sent it to me automatically, as you say, half an hour before it's due to start. And that's where I normally start the space from, but it's not there. So I couldn't do that.
Yeah, it just sounds like one of the many issues with Twitter. These little things that I guess this is the fallout from not having enough engineers on staff to stay on top of these things.
Yeah, I think, it's come and gone. We spoke about it last week about how Spaces disappeared for 12 hours. And when it came back, it didn't necessarily come back in the form that it left us. So, we had things like clips. We had captions. We had notifications half an hour before we were due to go live that were really useful. And some of those things aren't there anymore. But, Spaces itself is still here. So we rejoice in that for today.
Exactly. I'm so glad it's here. Yay. I'm really not too concerned that it's going to go away. I feel like if it was going to go, or if Twitter was going to completely die off, that all that would have happened already. We've had the little issues here and there, but for the most part, it just seems to be going well. And I'm happy, you're happy. And, as long as there's news for us to talk about with social audio, it's so interesting how these past couple of years now that we've been hosting this together, it's been so heavy in the news with just constantly about Twitter Spaces, and we're starting to see less and less news about Spaces.
Yeah, we are, but we're starting to see less and less news about social audio in general, really. I mean, time was, Sunday for me was, the Clubhouse town hall, got to be on there, got to listen to it, got to take notes. Robert Hanna used to do his LinkedIn audio event town hall, used to try and join that. That went down from weekly to fortnightly to monthly to him saying, hey, LinkedIn, where are you? I'm not doing this by myself anymore. Good on him, really, for doing that. But again, there's not that to check into. Lots of the smaller kind of standalone apps that were perhaps the asynchronous variety of social audio have folded and aren't there anymore. So, this is the shifting pattern of it, though, isn't it? I mean, this is it moving. And I think, as you said, I've definitely done a 360 on is Spaces going away. I'm quite confident now that it's not going away. But I do think it's not going to stay as we know it. And so it shouldn't, really. It should evolve and it should change. Because when this was first spun up, we didn't really know what to make of it. We didn't know what people would make with it, what the best content for it was, all of those kind of things. And all of that is being discovered and discussed while we're actually doing it. It's like building the thing while you're making the thing, doing the thing, all this kind of iterative building. And we saw that in spades with the Twitter teams that were behind it. And just because they're not there anymore, there are certainly people that are there doing various things at Twitter, as we know at the moment. And I'm sure Spaces is very much on their list for being adapted, changed, evolving. Who knows what it might end up with? It might not look anything like it does today, but, we're part of that journey and I'm quite proud of that, really. Anyway, welcome everyone. It's so lovely to see everybody. January's properly underway now.
Yeah, and not a whole lot of news to report for this week, but we do have some interesting things to discuss. We have a small little group DM, you and me, and a few of our honorary co-hosts that help us from time to time. And we always have really interesting discussions. And just a reminder to you all, having group DMs, I think is one of the powerful features we have our DM, right? We can inbox, we can connect with people through a private message in Twitter, but not everybody realizes you can group people together. Just don't do it in a spammy way, because sometimes people do that. Like all of a sudden you're part of some big group DM. It's like, who are these people? Why was I put in here? And there's just your inbox is exploding. But it's really powerful. So don't do that. But it's powerful for small groups, and especially when you are discussing the same topic or similar topics, and you've got a lot in common. And I just love our ongoing, really you and I started that group DM with them because they would from time to time come in and help us with co-hosting here in All Things Audio. We decided let's just have a little group DM in place so we could always easily connect with any of them at any given time. But it's really turned into like a small little mini community of us that we're always talking about social audio and having amazing conversations. I learned so much from all of you in that group DM. It's incredibly powerful, Suze.
Oh, yeah, for sure. And, 100% our content, is very much boosted by the things that Morgan, Michael, Jennifer, all kind of throw into our group DM. It's, a real kind of talk. We like to talk about these different things, and we like to find out what each of us thinks about it. And it's really interesting. But this particular one I thought was, kind of top of mind, to be honest, because it's all about topics and discoverability, which we've started off talking about already, about how, discoverability is key. And Michael actually had posted a screenshot into our group of a space that was running live that had 124 people listening, which is no small audience. I'd like 124 people. We've had hundreds of people in here, haven't we, Madeline? But, so this one's got 124 people listening. It is one of these follower spaces. So it is literally there for people to follow each other.
Follow to follow. You'll see this. Follow to follow. And here's what's interesting. They're never recorded because I think technically they're breaking some Twitter rules, because you're not supposed to do stuff like that. I've yet to see one that was recorded that you could go back and watch the replay or listen to the replay. So interesting. But these are available. These are out there. And Michael had taken a screenshot of this particular one you're talking about. That's why we don't have a tweet to put in the nest. This was just through our group DM and screenshots. But
the interesting thing about this is that they'd really pushed, they're trying to work the system in terms of it being discovered by tagging it with 3 really apparently popular topics. So, that they're not topics that are necessarily relating to the space. They are just out of the choice of topics that you've got when you set up a space. They've gone, okay, well, if we tag this world news, technology and camping.
Interesting. Camping. Well, I don't know why they put camping. I mean, world news would probably grab a larger audience. Technology. I mean, I think what most people would have chosen would be like digital creators, digital marketing, and Twitter. Like those are the 3, I think, if you're trying to do a follow for follow room. But this is actually quite interesting how they chose out of the 3, 2 that I think would be very, very popular topics on Twitter. And then one off the wall one, which maybe was part of an experiment or something.
Absolutely. So, I mean, do we think that that's where those 124 people have come from in terms of they're then seeing the space algorithmically because they're following those topics that are...
Most likely.
Yeah. To me, it seems like that it's very similar to someone who might write a tweet and then hashtag it with something that's completely irrelevant but that's trending just to get eyeballs on it and to gain further reach. I mean, is that kind of a similar like for like?
Yeah, like clickbait. I think so. But I did something really interesting. I decided to do some sleuthing after reading all of this stuff that we're talking about. So I went over to spacesdashboard.com. If you're not familiar, it's a great discoverability website. Thanks to our good friend Andrew Lyons, who I see is here in the room live with us. And what I wanted to do was to track down this particular profile that Michael has screenshotted to show us about, these follow for follow rooms. This person's Twitter name is J Girl, the letter J and girl. So I did some sleuthing, found her profile. And of course, when I go to her profile, I don't see any spaces because they're not to be found. But I thought, why don't I go to Spaces dashboard? And I was able to find her in there and go look at some of these rooms that she's hosting. Now, because these rooms have ended and they weren't recorded, I'm not able to see what the topics were, what topics they chose. And maybe Andrew can fill us in on that later when we open up the mics. But I'm assuming that if it was recorded, I'm guessing, or maybe because this is just live information, and so only when it's live. I don't know. But because I was curious, like, is this girl like changing up the topics each time and just trying different things to see what works? But in just scanning her profile in Spaces dashboard, I could see that her last one was January 6th. She had 2,200 people live total. But I don't know what the topics are. But the title of the room was Follow for Follow, turn on my notifications for, and then it cuts out for daily something. But here's the thing that's interesting, Suze, and we're not advocating you guys doing stuff like don't do follow for follow rooms. That's really, gaming the system is going to do what good for you. Like, we want people to engage with us, not fake followers. But this particular room that she hosted in Spaces, it said duration 9 hours and 56 minutes. So the 2,200 was over the course of almost 10 hours. And it shows that there were 46 speakers. So they had a bunch of people come up over that time. But I wish I could see what the topics were. Because wouldn't that be interesting, Suze, to be able to go through these previous spaces to see, are they using the topics consistently, or are they experimenting with different things? Because some of these rooms had very small numbers, but a lot of them had really large numbers.
Yeah, I mean, topics still baffle me a bit. I daren't change the topics that I've got on All Things Audio on this space, because if I remove one of them, and I can't remember what one it is, but if I remove it, it's not actually on the topics list anymore. And it's one that I think is kind of relevant, and I can't find anything that I feel is more relevant than what I've got on there. I know we've got small businesses on there, we've got digital marketing. I can't remember that third one, which is quite annoying, but it's one of the only tools that we've got to try and help with discoverability. And so, we've said before about those lists being kind of random. It's just really frustrating that they don't kind of match up with the kind of content that is being used. And in one respect, this is quite an ingenious way of trying to beat the system. I mean, it is awful trying to be discovered on Spaces at the moment. I mean, our next story is even worse regarding discoverability. It is something that people don't want to create on Spaces unless they can get some people listening and talking to each other. That's the whole point of this feature. And so to have that kind of topics feature that doesn't really work very well at least it's there. I mean, I'm happy it's there. I don't know. Is this genius or is this madness?
Right, exactly. And on the flip side of the whole topics, with adding them to Spaces, you also want to go onto your Twitter account and go put in relevant topics, because that should help curate a better feed for you with the tweets when you're on the home screen, as well as it should be working better for you with discoverability when you are using Spaces. It should show you relevant Spaces, based on what you chose for topics. And all you have to do on the navigation is go to more, and then you'll see topics. And you can just go in there and choose topics. And I actually use this feature came out several years ago, and I've been using it all this time because I want my home feed to be a little bit more curated. And I have a variety of things in there. It's interesting that Clubhouse is actually a topic, Suze. I think that's so funny that that is one. And what's interesting that I noticed very early on when they kept adding more and more topics for us to choose, Clubhouse was a topic way before Twitter Spaces was a topic.
Yeah, I remember that.
In the topic section. I just thought that was the craziest thing. But I have like digital marketing, I have dogs, I have inspirational quotes, marketing. Now, because I have this whole list of these, when I am in the audio tab, and I still have that newer, I know some people have been reverted back to the old one. I'm still in that newer one. And you swipe across and it'll show you, different things. It's actually based on the topics you chose. Like I see technology pops up and it says, because you follow women in tech. That's a topic I chose. The next one, this is wrong. It says education, but underneath, because you follow marketing. So I don't know why education and marketing, those don't. I guess somehow they figure that's related. And then there's the next one says marketing, and below it, because you follow marketing. So that makes sense. And then television, because you follow Shark Tank. Isn't that interesting? So they're trying to curate it in that newer audio tab. But the problem that I see in this, Suze, is that it's mostly podcasts, not spaces. It's just showing me different podcasts. And I would rather see the spaces.
Yeah, I want to know what spaces are live when I'm on Twitter. When I'm on Twitter, I'm there and I'm happy to spend my time on the platform. And I want to know what all the things I can do while I'm there are. I mean, it'd be like walking into a leisure centre and not knowing what classes are on or whether there's pools open and not being able to find out, wouldn't it? I mean, it'd be like walking just into the hallway and all the doors being shut and no one being there to ask. It's just bonkers. And it doesn't help in terms of our next topic of conversation, which is the spacebar disappearing. Which happened recently as well. I mean, if the spacebar disappears and you're left with nothing but the audio tab, which only has podcasts in it, then it is extremely difficult, if not impossible, to find a live space unless you go onto Space's dashboard, where you can always find out which spaces are live, and you can join them from there because it will bring you back into Twitter if you click on the space that you want to join. But, it just seems crazy that there's not an easy way of seeing all the live spaces available. And yeah, I mean, did the bar disappeared for you, didn't it, Madeline, during the week?
It did. And it was really odd because there would be a day where the space bar is gone and then the next day it would be back. And it wasn't due to a download or anything. I know there was an iOS download last week, but it had nothing to do with that. It was just really bizarre. And other people were talking about the same thing. There one day, gone the next, and then back again.
Yeah, a bit like the space bar hokey cokey. Very odd.
Exactly. But there has been a lot of talk in the last few weeks of it disappearing. But, it seems to be coming back. I think, again, this just goes back to, Twitter's in a transition period right now. They got a lot going on over there. And hopefully things like this will get resolved and not be an ongoing issue. Because there's nothing worse, especially with a platform that's been around as long as Twitter. This is not a startup. I know Elon's in the startup mentality with what he's doing with Twitter right now, but still, many of us have been using this for many, many years. We do very specific things on Twitter, and it can be frustrating that little things are breaking when you would think that, okay, aren't they kind of beyond that? Shouldn't that not be happening?
Yeah, and I think those of us that have been using it consistently were kind of hoping we were over that phase. But yeah, I think we can probably expect more breakages to come as they build what will be the Spaces 2.0, maybe.
It's the new norm. It's a new normal now for us, I think, I think we just have to step back and go, you know what? It's more like a startup now. We got to get over it. Things are going to break.
Yeah, they're going to break. And I don't know, in a way, I'd love to, I'm excited to see what Spaces becomes. Does it end up being, 4 profile pictures along each line? There's lots of different ways this thing could look and lots of different things that could be included in it. And we've talked about them at length over the last 2 years, the different things we'd like to see, stuff that we've liked, stuff that we haven't. It will be interesting to see what new brains on this feature will come up with and what it will end up being like. But I think for now, for those of us consistently using it, we just have to, take the rough with the smooth and go with the flow. And some days our Spaces bar will be there and some days it won't. And it's annoying, but it's part of the journey.
Exactly.
So our next story actually takes us away from Twitter. I just wanted to highlight this piece that I'd seen on digiday.com. It was a bit of a roundup, really, of CES, which is the big tech conference that happened last week. And they're just really, because this was an article that talks about podcasting and audio and the potential for growth in that area over the coming weeks, months and years. And I was just really excited to see someone at CES talking about audio being really important in terms of sonic branding. So things like tunes, jingles that you relate to your content. They're speaking here about the fact that recognition via audio is really important for businesses and brands. And that's something that I've been researching and thinking about for a really long time. And also links in quite nicely with the podcast episode that we're going to be talking about in a little bit as well, Madeline, doesn't it? It's just exciting to see Sarah Stringer, who's the EVP and head of US media partnerships at Dentsu, talking about how their agency has been boosting podcasting in recent years, and how she really feels like it's going to see an explosion really of audio storytelling as we really start to figure out how immersive audio can get and how it can be used in storytelling. I just find all of that so exciting, and I feel like there's a whole creative audio world there. It's like someone giving me a box of toys. I'm so excited. There's so much beyond what we even know about now that's yet to come in audio, and it's exciting that they were talking about it at CES for sure.
Yeah, it's a really interesting article. I like that whole section talking about podcasting getting more immersive. So I definitely encourage everybody to check out this article.
Yeah, and I think as well, it harks back to that whole kind of linking smart speakers into audio, which I know I hark on about quite a lot. But the whole idea that immersive experience will actually allow us to talk with the audio that we're listening to, whether that's in a social audio space like it is here, or whether it's in more of a text-to-speech or conversational podcast arena. I don't even know what that might look like. You could be in a soundscape and you could be able to talk and interact with it in some way. All of those kind of ideas. I just think there's an awful lot more still to come from audio in the coming years.
Agreed. And then I came across a really interesting tweet and article for those podcasters out there in the audience. I know we get plenty of podcasters like Susan and I that are here with us. And Matt Navarra had shared a tweet earlier today saying that Apple is now opening up the podcast subscription to publishers on rival services. So, there's other hosting providers that are really popular like Blueberry, Libsyn. I've been using Libsyn forever. Omni Studio, and then even RSS, RSS.com, that this article from 9 to 5 Mac that talks about how through those providers, you'll now be able to start utilizing Apple podcast subscriptions instead of going directly through Apple. So I thought that was really interesting news, Suze, because plenty of our listeners are podcasters, and I didn't even know about it till I saw this tweet today.
Yeah, and usually Apple play pretty close to their chests, don't they? I mean, what they create, they keep to themselves. It's a very closed ecosystem. I know, even in voice, their voice activation is literally to connect Apple devices or, connect you to Apple content. It's not something that's going to draw in from third party or anything like that. So to hear that they're actually going out and allowing people to subscribe to Apple Podcasts via these other hosting providers is a really interesting move from them, I think. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. And now we're going to transition to something I had shared about a month ago. It was a really interesting podcast episode I'd listened to, but then we took some time off, for the new year or the end of the year. Now we're in the new year. And last week we had decided to give out some homework. Curious if any of our listeners took us up on this. But it was a really interesting podcast episode from Chasing Life. It's a podcast with Dr. Sanjay Gupta. He's the medical correspondent on CNN, on the cable news network, and is really interesting talking about the power of sound. And you finally got a chance to listen to it, Suze, and you were so excited. You told me you couldn't wait to come discuss your thoughts on this with us. And I just hope for those here who have not had the chance to listen to it, I did put the tweet in the nest. Gives you the direct link to it, but it's also available in any of your favorite podcast players. Just go to Chasing Life. I had to go listen to it again, just, so I'd be ready for today. But I can't wait to hear your thoughts on it because this is super interesting.
Yeah, I mean, I've listened to it twice now and I've bought the book.
Oh, wow.
I mean, I'm well immersed in this. So For the last couple of years, I've taken myself on a self-research journey. I think I'll call it that. I mean, I'm a bit of a learnaholic, and I absolutely love sound. And so I couldn't find a course that would cover everything that I wanted to really understand and learn about. So I just started buying lots of books, and I've read a heck of a lot around sound and around why we react to certain sounds the way we do, how sound prompts emotion in people. And I guess what the key to what I'm trying to unlock is that I create notification sounds and those kind of teeny tiny little sounds for apps and for other developers and for gamers and that kind of thing. It's part of what I do. And I wanted to truly understand how those sounds prompt a reaction in people. Because sometimes these sounds actually make you move. They make you look at your phone screen. They make you think, oh, I've got a message. And I'm really interested in that relationship. Now, I've read, as I say, quite a lot of books on this over the last 5 years. This book and this podcast, oh my goodness, I was almost in tears with how much information it gave me in such a short time. I absolutely loved it. It was so clear. I mean, obviously, it's a CNN podcast episode, so the production quality itself of the podcast was amazing. Really well presented and brought to us. But Nina Kraus, she is the lady who's being interviewed by Dr. Gupta, and she just speaks so eloquently and in such layman's terms, really easy and accessible what she's explaining. And yet she's talking about how sound and experiences basically build new pathways within our brain, and how the electrical signals within our brain that fire can actually sound, if you convert those brain waves into sound waves, can sound like the sounds that we're listening to. It was just incredible. I mean, Madeline, I'm clearly in awe over here, but what was your impression of it?
Well, just when they were starting the episode and talking about that, how without even thinking about it, there's always sound around, there's noise around you, sound like you can turn off like things. You cannot turn off hearing. You can close your eyes, you can do different things, but you cannot make sound go away. And I just thought it was so interesting how that's how they started this. And I was so impressed with this professor, Dr. Nina Kraus. So interesting. And it's a short conversation. The whole episode is like 27 minutes.
Yeah, it's
short.
I mean, I could have listened to her for another hour, and I'm not someone who enjoys lengthy podcasts. I mean, I'm a podcast producer. I'll listen to whatever someone gives me to listen to. But generally, for my own listening, I do like a nice 20 to 40-minute podcast. I mean, it was just perfect in every respect. But yeah, you're right about what she says. You can close your eyes, but you can't close your ears. And she explains that that's why it's so important that we have a healthy sonic world, I think is the way that she describes it. That we make sure that actually some of these notification sounds like I'm creating, they're noise pollution. That there's enough noise pollution in the world, but if everything's binging and banging and bonging at you, and that's firing your brain on all these different cylinders all the time, that's a noisy, busy, road to burnout kind of world. And that's really important that people take that as kind of part of their sonic health, if you like. I loved it. She made some really amazing points around how the mind makes kind of positive sound connections. So very much in terms of like connecting sound to memories and past experiences, and how the brain then kind of learns that, and that impacts how we hear and react to sound in the future. I mean, it's just a whole different world beyond. It's just incredible.
It's definitely fascinating, and just talking about, like you were saying, like the audio and memories and things. You know how like with certain TV shows, they have like that intro music, and sometimes like, we're now like conditioned, especially with like Netflix, how you can skip ahead, right? The intro comes up, you can just hit the little button and skip ahead. But what I find that's so interesting, Suze, there are certain TV shows where I love that music that starts, so I will never skip over that. Even though I don't want to look at the credits, I don't want to look at that opening stuff, I just want to hear that music, because it becomes like the brand for that particular show you're watching. Is that odd? This podcast episode kind of gets you thinking about, it was something I didn't really think about before. And then it's so interesting how there's some TV shows like, I can't wait to skip ahead. I don't want to hear that intro music. I'm so over it. I don't like it. But then some of them is like, I just love this. And I could listen to it all day. So I thought it was just weird. But after listening to this episode, it's like, okay, it's not so weird.
No, it's not. I mean, she says, listening isn't just a sensation, it's an experience. And I think that's really key to what you're saying. You experience that show, and the sound of the intro is part of that experience. And, layering on the whole sonic branding thing, which is, another avenue that I've been researching heavily as well. That's why it's so important that if you are going to use music within your brand or business, on your YouTube channel or your podcast or anything else, that you really feel like that reflects your brand and your business. You'll think about your visual palette, won't you? You'll think about what colours you're going to use, what logo you're going to have, and the music and sounds that you use, and even the tone of voice, like the language that you use, that should all reflect who you are and what the business wants to reflect properly. So it's worth just considering and spending a little time thinking about those kind of things. And there's definitely an edge to what she says that I can relate to in terms of the different things that I work on in sound. But yeah, it's super, super interesting. I mean, the book is called Of Sound Mind, How Our Brain Constructs a Meaningful Sonic World. And she says it's her love letter to sound, which I can well believe. It's so easy to read as well. It's just like listening to her on the podcast. It is very straightforward. And I think she's worked very hard to make sure that it's very accessible and that people can actually understand it. The first section of it is just about how the ear works. And that is fascinating as well. I mean, I've read over what I would now call kind of a gloss of how the ear works. This lady really goes deeply into what every tiny little element, where that sound goes from when it's being made right through into your brain, and then how you're going to interpret that and how it might impact you in future. It's incredible. So yeah, I'm very grateful to you, Madeline, for giving me the homework. I can't wait for my next bit.
Nice. Well, I found it to be super interesting. And because it was talking about just audio stuff, sonic branding, all that's like, oh, this is something I know Suze would love to hear and learn what this lady has to say about this topic. Because you are just so passionate about the topic. And when you're listening to this lady's interview, she is too. So I thought, you would really enjoy listening.
Yeah, I did think about trying to find her on Twitter and seeing if she'd be my best friend, but I can't find her. So, I think we'd get on well.
Yeah, sounds like y'all would. And also through the live chat here in Spaces, I see that Matthew had posted a tweet talking about regarding branding. He says, I do wonder how important the actual voice, tone, pitch, accent is to build trust. Like a higher pitched female voice may be considered more trustworthy in finance discussions. And he just says that as a reference. And then another tweet says, for example, part of the reason I trust Madeline and now Suze are their actual voices. And I just find that so interesting. And I think that's why podcasting has become so popular over the years. I think that's why Spaces and other social audio formats. I think there is something about hearing somebody's voice that is trusting and becomes part of their brand.
This is what we've said about social audio all along. The connections that we've both made via social audio, Madeline, I think you'll agree, are way stronger, way quicker than the other connections that we've made via social media, whether that's Twitter or other platforms. And, thinking about it, this is our mode of communication. We generally talk to each other, listen to each other, and Spaces and social audio allows us to do that. So it's kind of that natural connection. And not being able to see you with video doesn't really matter and I don't think would add anything extra to it. But I mean, it's interesting. When I was at the radio station, we had voice coaching every so often. I mean, reading bulletins daily. But all of us that were women were continually trying to lower our voices. So we were all being told to sound more monotone, deeper, have a deeper voice so that it would cut through, because anyone that sounded kind of pitchy and high pitched wouldn't sound, wouldn't have that gravity of tone to deliver the news. So it is, it's not new. I guess, radio has thought about it for years and years and years. Podcasting certainly thought about it for a few years. And now we're here on social audio, and we've got all of the various different live streaming tools that we've got at our disposal. I think more and more people are thinking about how, what they sound like reflects what they're doing and who they are.
Right, exactly. And there's also a tweet in the chat just came through from Gary Stockton saying, great point about the feel-good TV show music, and mentioning that there's a song by The Who that was inspired by Hill Street Blues and St. Elsewhere, which is a really good point. And to add to that, so I'm trying to think like what kind of intro song has me like right now, just like makes me want to watch the show just because the music's a big part of it is, and this sounds a little wacky for me to say this out loud. I'm not like a big sports fan, but there is a reality show on, what is it, HBO Max, called Hard Knocks. And it's funny because I do not watch football, but it's like behind the scenes of a football team. And it's more of that interests me, like behind the scenes stuff I always find fascinating. But it's the intro music, Suze. I absolutely love it. Is symphony music. And I am not normally a person that listens to symphony music. I'm a rocker girl. I love rock music, pop music, stuff like that. I don't sit around listening to anything that is like symphony music, but that's this intro music. It's like dun 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 dun. It's almost like a Rocky thing, like dun, dun, and I love it. And I was watching the show recently, and I'm thinking I could listen to this song all day. It just gives me a feeling, and I guess that's what this lady was talking about really in this podcast that we were talking about. Is like how you associate things through sound. And I realized when I hear that song, and it has nothing to do, I'm not thinking about the TV show itself, sports, none of that. It's just something about this song that just does something to me. So I find it fascinating.
Yeah. And similarly, I like to try and pick apart why there are certain songs that I can just listen to on repeat continually. And, that they become kind of real old favourites. And recently there was a song that I would never have dreamt of kind of pulling out of Spotify, but I think my son might have been listening to it, and I ended up with it in my ears on Spotify while I was walking to the train station, because that's what happens when you've got a family account on Spotify, people. It gets polluted by teenagers. And I was walking along listening to it, and I realised that actually this song, the BPM on it, the beats per minute, were just perfectly in time with my steps. And so now I'm going back and wondering whether or not all of those songs that I really like, are they the ones that power me down to the station when I'm in that walking mode? And actually, if they've all got, say, 89 beats per minute, maybe that's just the pace that I walk at. And because they fit within the rhythm of what I'm doing, they're really resonating with me. So I'm really interested in that at the moment as well. I mean, any researchers out there that want to, get together, go for a grant, let's find out about it, because I'm well up for it.
That is so interesting. I love it. Yeah, I could totally see that like having to do with the beats per minute.
Yeah, but I'd never really thought about that before. It's just I suddenly noticed it. I just thought, why am I listening to this song on repeat that I would not listen to like in the kitchen or driving along? It's completely different. And yeah, that I kind of thought, oh, hang on a minute, I'm not dancing to it, but it's like very definitely in step. Like I'm in step with it, and so I guess that's aligned somewhere in my brain. So yeah, interesting, really interesting. Cool. We've got George up as a speaker. Hi there, George. How are you today?
Hi, shalom from Israel.
Yeah, great to have you here all the way from other side of the world.
Thank you. What I would like to suggest is instead of all of us complaining about the lack of discoverability and lack of integration of any kind of discoverability and now notifications in spaces, that we start a campaign. I've got 2 suggested tweets in the chat. I'll put them up in the nest. But we should be tweeting about the lack of it's absurd. The lack of discoverability. It's almost like spaces, they're trying to hide spaces. If they want people to be using the feature, they got to make it usable.
I agree.
I think without people being able to find them, it's dead in the water, isn't it?
It'd be tragic if they said, well, people aren't using Spaces anymore, so we're going to shut it down. And they made it so that we couldn't use Spaces. Unless we're really addicts and we know about a space that goes on all the time on a regular basis, or people just happen to discover it in your timeline or have you on notifications. I think your Spaces do come up when somebody is on notifications, does a space.
But what I think is absolutely crazy is that this has been a topic of conversation now for 2 whole years. And surely when you build a feature like this, you want people to use it. And whether that's creating or listening, you want people there involved with it. So why would you not build it on a foundation of being easily searchable, discoverable, showing people the way? I mean, I get that in the very early days with the beta group and, you don't want to knock down the whole platform, etc., etc. But at the stage we were even 6 months ago, discoverability has never, ever been aced on the platform. It's just never been right. The audio tab did nothing but confuse things, I think. And the spacebar is very limited. We lost fleets to give it the spacebar, but yeah, I don't know. It just seems crazy.
I have a solution. Elon needs to purchase Spaces dashboard from Andrew and incorporate it into Twitter, and problem solved. Everybody's happy, especially Andrew.
Yeah, especially Andrew. Yeah, definitely. Drinks are on you, mate.
Well, let's hear from our other speakers. Michael's here with us. Hey, Michael, how are you?
Hello, friends. Good to speak with you and be here with you again. I came to this stage to talk about the power of sound, but I also can fill in some things on Clubhouse if you'd like. We had DM'd a little bit, and I had never really gotten back to you about sort of the updates on houses and so on. So,
oh, yes. Houses being open to the public hallway, Michael. This was the new bit of news this week from Clubhouse, wasn't it?
right, yeah. So houses, for those who don't know, are sort of private little communities on Clubhouse where people can open up rooms to speak with each other, and they're house chats where people can post images, reply, react with emoji, and so on. And up until this week, those rooms that people would have in the houses they remained in the houses. And so only the members of the houses could create them and see them. They could ping people in from outside, but they weren't seen by the public at large. Now, Clubhouse has enabled the option. It's not guaranteed or anything like that. That a room in a house, while it's going on, like a space here, could be opened up to the public hallway on Clubhouse. So, if somebody wanted to start a room in a house talking about, I don't know, a particular sport or whatever, and they get a certain number of people in there, they're like, okay, well, nobody else is coming in. Let's open it up to the public hallway. The moderators could do that. And then all of the people who follow the speakers and the people in the room and so on would see that room. They could come in. Their icon in the room will have a little ticket emoji showing that they are a guest of that house room. And it is a way for houses to be better discovered on Clubhouse because the house name still shows up at the top of the room. And so, if somebody's interested in that sport and that community and they're not a member of the house, they could tap on that house name and join the wait list. And then somebody in the house, whoever has the ability to allow people into the house, they could invite them in, and those new people would become members of the house. So, like I said, it is optional. The admins of the house can turn that off so that rooms can still only stay private within a house. But it is another way for communities to be discovered and to grow on Clubhouse. I hope that clarifies some things.
I get it. Thank you, Michael. That made perfect sense. So, yeah, I completely understand they can take a house from that invite-only environment, push it out into the public hallway, and then have other people join it for that instance of the house if those people that join in that moment want to hear more from that house and become more involved, then they need to join the wait list and be accepted in.
Right, yeah. So that room is only visible that is the only thing visible to the public. The house chat is still private to only house members. Any other room that's in the house, unless it is opened up to the public, will remain private into the house. So it's just on a room by room basis, depending on whether or not it's enabled by the admins and the moderator actually opens up the room to the rest of Clubhouse.
I have a question for you, Michael. Do you think that the idea of communities is catching on over at Clubhouse? Because it's been a big bust on Twitter.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And really, there have been various ways that communities have formed on Clubhouse. The first really big one was clubs. They were sort of the precursor to houses. Now, houses are sort of a different sort of container for communities to be built. They're a little bit more maybe like a Discord server, if you want to think of it that way, but just for social audio. And yeah, so there's a couple of different ways to build community. And yeah, lots of people on Clubhouse just see Clubhouse as a big community in itself, too.
Yeah, and I've just shared Sajad's tweet that I came across literally just as you were talking, really. So he said Clubhouse was severely injured and was going to die if not for the approach of houses. In other words, Clubhouse as a social audio platform is dead. Now we are into Clubhouse 2.0, driven by communities. Would you agree with that?
To some extent, yes. Now, I will say that my understanding is that Clubhouse as a platform was actually kind of hamstrung by the coding and the way that it was actually written. And so a lot of the features that the community on the platform was asking for and that the leadership and staff of Clubhouse wanted to do, they could not do because of the way it had been built from the beginning. And so part of what Houses has been for is to build Clubhouse onto uh, more diverse, more expandable code that gives them more opportunities for Web3, for adding features that people have been asking for, and so on. And so it kind of, in some ways, it's kind of a slow rebuilding of Clubhouse, while still, yeah, it's slowly pivoting to new code and replacing the old stuff that Clubhouse had been built on from the first place.
Thank you, Michael, for explaining all of that and giving your opinion on that tweet. That's great of you to join us. Did you say you listened to the Power of Sound episode?
I did not, but I really want to now. But I mean, I do agree. I've been doing sound since I was 13 years old, so almost 30 years now, and it is powerful. And in some ways, it is one of the most efficient ways to communicate with and understand other people. But it also, like we've talked about sonic branding, or you mentioned that, it can trigger thoughts in us, emotions in us. It can almost be like a Pavlovian sort of effect that when we hear something, we immediately look at a thing or do a thing. And, if you think about it, there are podcasts that are just audio, but there's no podcasts that are just video. Sound is always the bedrock of the audio visual experience of life. And so gosh, people say, if you could choose to be either blind or deaf, which would you be? And I would totally choose to be blind because I would hate to lose my hearing. And I know that there are people who are deaf and they accept that and they embrace that. But there is something about sound that is so powerful that I think we're still continuing as humanity to really appreciate and understand.
What's the first of the senses that really get activated before the baby even opens his eyes? It can hear sounds. The sound of the human voice is probably the most powerful sensation. It's just amazing. And also, people intuitively understand that the voice is much harder for people to fake the voice than it is to fake facial expressions. So it's the voice that establishes trust way before what somebody looks like.
Interesting point, George. I love that. And Michael, thank you for sharing your insights. Very interesting. And then we also have Matthew here with us. Hey, Matthew, how's it going?
Hi, doing well. Hi from Seattle and Bellevue. To kind of follow on that about, and I have a question for you. About 10 years ago, I was fairly heavily involved online with the Mayo Clinic social media network, which is one of the stronger healthcare social media networks, and I engaged with them via blogs and via Twitter and via Facebook regularly. But after I went to a conference 10 years ago and I met these people face to face for just an hour here or a conversation there, as soon as I got back, my digital trust relationship with these people jumped up an order of magnitude and led to different opportunities and everything else. Because I think there's a relationship between face-to-face trust and digital trust. And if you have face-to-face trust, then your digital trust becomes much stronger. But I'm just wondering if voice is really the new face-to-face trust, if there's an opportunity here with voice relationships, because there's so much information, as both George and Michael pointed out, there's so much more information, analog information contained in voice that's picking up on people's subconscious cues and other things. So I'm just going to throw that out there, and have you guys comment on it, and I'll turn off my mic.
Thank you. Great question. I can't wait to hear what Suze has to say because I know this is like her area.
Yeah, it certainly is, but I'm really excited to hear what Michael's going to say.
Oh, it's funny because, I'm on Clubhouse a lot more than I'm on Twitter Spaces. And I've heard so many times on Clubhouse when people have built relationships over there in rooms and through the communities there, they then go on to meet each other in real life. They meet each other face to face. And time after time after time, when I hear these stories, the story goes something like this. It was just like it was on Clubhouse. They were just the same person in person as they were on Clubhouse. And getting that face-to-face interaction cemented a relationship that they had already built through voice only. And so I think you're right, Matthew, that I think the core of it is the voice and the sound of each other, and adding that face-to-face interaction just sort of broadens the relationship and cements it even more. But I would also like to hear what George has to say because he's done a ton of this with voice over the years.
Yeah. Well, we started what's now called social audio 53 years ago, and we had special interest groups over conference call, and they formed very strong relationships. They came back week after week, became very close friends, and since we were doing our experiments only in New York because of the prohibitive cost of telephone conference calls nationwide, all the groups decided to meet at various times, and they take the back room of a New York restaurant or something, and they would meet, and it was electric. It was dynamite. It was like they had the phrase that was almost always used was, I feel like I've known you for years. There's an intimacy to the human voice, and the human voice only, that I discovered doing focus groups. I could get more out of a telephone focus group than I could out of face-to-face groups. And I did thousands of both telephone and face-to-face, because there are people you can't do over the phone, or various products you need to present that you can't do over the phone. So I would travel around the country like every other focus group moderator, but I did probably 10-to-1 audio to face-to-face. I could get way more. Now, the clients didn't believe that. Clients came to me because I could get people you couldn't get into face-to-face groups. I could get groups of very high-level people. So that's why they came to me. But they thought all this stuff about telephone being better than face-to-face was just total bullshit until they ran their first maybe 6 to 10 groups. And then they would call me up and say, hey, George, stuff you've been saying about telephone groups, we do get more out of audio than we do out of video. And the whole explanation of it's a long explanation, but it comes down to two words: psychological safety. People open up on audio that in ways they just don't open up face to face. They anticipate scowls. They're more formal. They come dressed in their pearls and high heels and all that to face, but they're just in their pajamas in audio in their own familiar environment, much safer. So it's, there's one thing talking about sounds, whole other thing talking about the human voice, which is a subcategory, obviously, of sounds. It's in a category by itself, and its power is completely unappreciated. It's funny to watch everybody rediscovering this, 50 years later.
There's definitely something super powerful about voice. And, I got into podcasting 10 years ago. It was 2013. And I very quickly saw the power of using that as a platform to market my business, my work, and just to add to my social media voice. And then I launched the Twitter Smarter podcast in 2015. And I could not believe the impact I was making from just talking about ways to utilize Twitter better. It was just a short form podcast, me interviewing a guest each week and just having them share their best Twitter tips. Me and this other guest having a conversation. These were usually episodes that were anywhere from 15 to maybe 25 minutes long. Most of them were pretty short. And to see the reaction from people all over the world, gravitate to me over that. It was incredible. And I know, Suze, you've been podcasting a long time. Did you always find that as well, that through podcasting? And I feel like social audio, like what we're doing right now, is just a live version. I feel like it's live podcasting is what this is.
Yeah, and I think my comment really would be on what Matthew said. Conferences, going to the conference and meeting lots of people, that's you've got to be in that moment at that time to speak to those people. They're usually quite expensive to attend, all that kind of thing. And I guess what podcasts do is allow you to hear people, usually consistently, because podcasters generally create their content very consistently, whether it's weekly, fortnightly, monthly. You will hear from them actually in your body, in your ears, via your headphones, and build up that rapport on your own time. So you're not having to travel anywhere. It's a more cost-effective way of doing it, and you can do it in your moment, not in the moment of that one specific event or conference. And what that consistency with the podcast does is build up that trust relationship, because as the listener, you're hearing those people talk directly to you, even though for the podcaster, they're able to talk to lots of people by creating that content in audio. And that really does truly build up those relationships. And in the instances where I've gone on to meet either people that I've met on social audio, and I've met a few people that I've met here on Spaces in the flesh. And yeah, it is exactly the same chatting to them, over lunch as it is chatting to them right here in Spaces. It's incredible. And those people, become friends. It's beyond the networky effect. It's beyond the I'm here on Twitter to, tell you about my business or podcasting or whatever. And it becomes a deeper relationship. And there's, definitely magic in that first instance of being able to talk to people, listen to people, and that very basic instinct that we've got. Definitely.
Also, let's not forget that 11-year-old girl that I always quote, who was asked, do you prefer radio or television? She said radio, and she was asked why. She said, because the pictures are better.
Well, on that note, this will be a great point to end this amazing conversation. Thank you all so much for joining Suze and I today. Loved hearing from you all. And we're available in all of your favorite podcast apps. We're out there, All Things Audio. You can also go to allthingsaudiopodcast.com as well.
You certainly can. And you can catch us here on Twitter and use the hashtag AllThingsAudio, and we'll pick that up throughout the week. So that's it for this week. But thank you so much to everyone that's been here in the space with us and those of you listening. And we'll catch up with you next week.
Bye, everybody.